She didn't open the door expecting to find anything alive. The cattle wagon had been sitting behind the old freight platform for 6 weeks. The rail line had rerouted in April, and the wagon just sat, wood rotting, hinges going to rust, the whole thing tilting slightly toward the south like a drunk man trying to sleep standing up. Emily Carter had walked past it 100 times. She'd stopped thinking of it as anything but part of the landscape. But on the night of November 3rd, 1878, in Gillespie County, Texas, it made a sound. Not an animal sound, not the shift of warped boards or the creak of cooling metal. A human sound, high and thin and desperate. 2 of them. She ripped the rusted door open with both hands and held up her lantern and saw, in the corner of the wagon floor, a single soaked blanket moving. She dropped to her knees before she understood why. She lifted the lantern lower, closer. Twin newborns. Lips the color of a winter sky. Skin like wet paper. One had stopped crying. The smaller one, the one on the left, lay so still that Emily's chest seized before she saw the tiny shudder of a breath. Pinned to the blanket, a folded piece of paper. 4 words in a woman's handwriting. God forgive me, please. She didn't think. She didn't plan. She ripped her own coat open with one hand and gathered both bundles against her chest and felt the cold of them hit her skin like a brand. Not on my watch, she heard herself say. Her voice was steadier than she felt. You hear me? Not on my watch. The smaller one made a sound, not a cry, a breath, threadbare and wet, the kind of breath that was trying to decide whether to bother. That's right, Emily whispered. That's right. You breathe for me. She was so focused on the 2 lives against her chest that she didn't hear the hooves on the road outside, didn't hear them stop, didn't hear the boots hit the ground. Mrs. Carter? She didn't look up. Mrs. Carter, it's Jack Turner, from the spread out past the river. She knew the name. Everyone in Gillespie County knew the name. Widower, quiet, came into town twice a month and never said a word he hadn't already decided on. Her late husband Thomas had called him the most reliable man in the county, which, coming from Thomas, who measured reliability the way other men measured gold, meant a great deal. There's 2 of them, she said. A pause. Beg pardon? 2 babies, Mr. Turner. Her voice cracked on the last word. Somebody left 2 babies in this wagon. She heard him climb up, slow and careful, the way you move around a spooked horse. He crouched a few feet from her. She looked up. He had taken his hat off and was holding it against his chest, like he'd walked into a church. Lord have mercy, he said softly. He looked at the 2 bundles. He looked at Emily. He looked at the smaller one, the still one, and something moved across his face, just for a second, that she wouldn't understand until much later in the night. Mrs. Carter. His voice was steady in the way that some men get in a crisis, not because they aren't afraid, but because they've learned that falling apart is a luxury nobody can afford right now. We need to get them warm. That's first. Everything else comes after. The smaller one? I see her. My place is closer than yours. My sister Sarah is there. She raised our youngest brother near single-handed. He met her eyes. Ma'am, that little one ain't going to last another half hour out here. We can think on the road. We cannot think in this wagon. Something inside Emily broke loose. The part of her that had been standing at crossroads for 2 years, ever since Thomas died under that railroad timber, and not knowing which direction to step. It broke loose, and she stopped thinking and started moving.
"Take us," she said. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels before it's done. Jack Turner gathered the infants the way a man gathers something he knows is sacred and fragile and temporary all at once.
He took the larger twin and tucked her against his shoulder. He passed the smaller one back to Emily with both hands, as careful as a man passing a lit lamp through a windstorm. "You hold that one tight," he said. "Don't let her loose for nothing. You say it back to me." "I won't let her loose." "All right, then." In the buggy, Emily held the smaller twin against her chest and felt her own breath shake in time with the wheels. The November wind came off the Llano River, cold enough to cut. She pulled her coat tighter around both of them and pressed her cheek to the small forehead and felt, underneath all that frightening cold, the faintest pulse of warmth still fighting. "Mr. Turner?" "Ma'am?" "Why didn't you ride for the sheriff first?"
He didn't answer right away. The buggy hit a rut. The smaller baby made a sound, thin, scraping, alive, and Emily pulled her tighter. "You want me to turn around?" he asked. "No, I'm asking why." He was quiet another moment. "Because I know what happens when the county takes a foundling infant, Mrs. Carter. And I figured maybe you knew too. Or maybe you was about to find out."
"What happens?"
"They put a price on them. $12 a head, per month, paid to whatever institution agrees to take them in. State pays it, the institution keeps it. The baby's well, the baby's just living in it." Emily stared at him.
"You're telling me—"
"A pair of healthy newborns, no kin and no questions, is worth $24 a month to the wrong man. And there's a wrong man in this county."
"Who?"
"Judge Leonard Graves." He said the name the way you say the name of a disease, flat, certain, already dangerous before it finished leaving your mouth. "I can't prove it yet, but I know it. In 1878, the Texas Territorial Code allowed county judges to serve simultaneously as presiding magistrates and as directors of county welfare trusts, a conflict of interest so brazen it reads from this distance like something invented. It was not invented. Records from Gillespie, Bastrop, and Caldwell counties document nearly identical arrangements, all running through the same decade, most of them never prosecuted. Leonard Graves was not unusual. He was just the one who got caught. The buggy turned up a long lane. Lamplight in a window up ahead. Sarah Turner was already on the porch. Sarah was 32 years old and had raised her youngest brother from the age of 8 when their mother took sick, and she moved through the next 2 hours the way a woman moves when she has learned that the difference between a bad situation and a catastrophe is usually just whether somebody keeps their head. She sent the ranch hand Hank for the milk goat before Jack had finished his second sentence. She had warm water and clean cloths on the table before Emily had crossed the threshold. She took one look at the smaller infant, at the blue-gray of her lips, at the way her chest barely moved, and said the words that mattered. "We've got to warm her slow, Jack, not fast. Fast will kill her. Slow." Jack stripped his shirt off without being asked. He sat in the rocking chair by the hearth and held the smaller baby against his bare chest under a blanket, skin against skin, because that is how you warm a thing back to life when nothing else will reach it. Emily sat across from him with the larger twin in her arms, and she watched a man she had spoken to fewer than a dozen times in her life breathe his own warmth into a stranger's child. And she thought, I don't know what I'm looking at, but I know it's real. "Mr. Turner?" "Ma'am?"
"You don't have to do this." He didn't look up from the small face tucked under his collarbone.
"I know what I don't have to do, Mrs. Carter."
Then why? A long quiet. The fire popped. Outside, the wind moved across the roof. My wife died 3 years ago this November, he said. Took our boy with her. He was... A pause. He was just about this size. Mr. Turner.
I ain't telling you for pity, ma'am. I'm telling you because you asked, and because if I sit here quiet, you might think I'm doing this because I'm a good man, and that ain't the whole truth of it.
What's the whole truth of it?
The truth is, I ain't held a child since I held him. Told myself I never would again.
He looked down at the small face against his chest. Something moved in his expression. Not quite grief, not quite peace. Something in between.
The Lord apparently has a sense of humor about that kind of promise.
Emily looked down at the larger twin sleeping in the crook of her arm. She thought of Thomas. She thought of the years they'd tried and failed, and the quiet way he'd never blamed her, and the way she'd spent 2 years since his death telling herself that at least she didn't have little ones to raise alone.
My husband passed 2 springs ago, she said. Railroad accident. Foreman on the new branch line.
She stopped, started again. He wanted children something terrible. We couldn't for whatever reason. And when he died, I told myself maybe that was a mercy. She looked at the baby in her arms. And now I'm sitting in your parlor with 2 of them.
Jack almost smiled. It was the smallest possible version of a smile, barely a shift in the lines around his mouth. Apparently, the Lord's got a sense of humor about your promises, too. She made a sound. It was almost a laugh. Almost. Ask yourself something honest. If you had found those 2 babies tonight, not in a story, but in real life, on a road you walked every day, what would you have done? Not what you want to believe you would have done, what you actually would have done. It is a harder question than it looks. And the people in this story, neither of them heroes, neither of them looking for a cause, answered it the only way that mattered. They just kept moving toward the crying.
The smaller baby's name came to them at midnight. It happened the way things happen when nobody is trying to make them happen. Sarah asked what they were going to call the babies for the night, because she said she couldn't keep saying the bigger one and the smaller one like they were calves. And Emily said Lily for the bigger one without thinking. And when Sarah asked about the little fighter, Jack said Noah before Emily could open her mouth. The room went still.
Sarah looked at her brother. He looked at the infant on his chest. He didn't look at either of them. It's just a name for the night, he said. We ain't carving it on anything. Sarah didn't answer, but Emily saw the way her eyes shone in the lamplight, and she understood without being told that Noah had been the name of the boy Jack had lost. She reached out, very slowly, and laid her hand on the back of his where it rested against the small spine. She didn't squeeze. She didn't say a word. He didn't move his hand. The second dropper of goat's milk went in at 1:45. The third made Noah open her eyes, dark, unfocused, trying to find something in the strange world she'd been dropped into. "Hello, little one," Emily whispered. "Hello there. We've been waiting on you." Jack's voice went rough. "Mrs. Carter." "Yes?" "What are we doing here?" She looked at him. He looked at her. Between them, the baby blinked. "By sunup," he said. "We got to know." "I know we do." "The conductor on the 8 o'clock line saw your lantern out by that wagon. He'll have told the agent at the next stop, and the agent will tell whoever asks, and somebody will be asking before noon. Then what do we do?" "That ain't a question I can answer for you, ma'am. These ain't my babies." He looked at her, steady and direct. "But you found them. And in this county, that means something, whether the law says so or not." She looked at the note still lying on the floor of that wagon somewhere in the dark. She dropped it when she lifted the babies. 4 words. "God forgive me, please." She thought about the woman who wrote those words. A woman young enough, or scared enough, or broken enough, to walk away from 2 children in November. She thought about what that woman's night looked like, the decision that had to be made, and made alone, and made with no good choices anywhere on the table. Emily knew something about nights like that. "Lily," she said softly to the larger twin, now sleeping against her shoulder, "and Noah." She looked up at Jack. "Whatever we decide in the morning, those are their names, at least for tonight." He nodded once. "At least for tonight." There is a particular kind of intimacy that forms between 2 people who go through an emergency together. Not romantic. Something older than that. More honest. The frontier produced it often. In the winter of 1878, across the Texas hill country, women and men who had never spoken more than pleasantries found themselves making the most consequential decisions of their lives beside people they barely knew in the middle of the night, because the alternative was to make those decisions alone. Necessity built more families in that territory than courtship ever did. Then, hooves on the road outside. More than one set. Jack was on his feet before the last hoofbeat stopped. He passed Noah to Sarah without a word. Sarah took both twins and disappeared down the hallway so fast her braid didn't stop moving until she was gone. Jack pulled on his shirt. He buttoned it slowly, the way, Emily would think later, a man buttons something he intends to face something serious in. "Mrs. Carter." His voice was low and even. "Whatever I say to whoever's at that door, you back me. You don't correct me. You don't add to it. You stand there and you let me lie." "Mr. Turner." "Ma'am, please. Just this once." "All right." He went to the window. He pulled the curtain back 1 finger's width. He let it fall. He turned back to her, and the steadiness in his face was a thing she would carry with her for the rest of her life. "It's the man I told you about," he said quietly. "The wrong man." She swallowed. "Graves." Graves. The fist that hit the front door rattled the lamp on the table. Jack walked to the door. He opened it. Judge Leonard Graves filled the frame in a black wool coat that had cost more than Jack made in a season. Behind him stood a younger man, pale and narrow-shouldered, holding a leather satchel against his chest like a shield. Behind both of them, 2 deputies. I want to stop here and say something plainly. Leonard Graves was not, by the standards of 1878 Texas, an unusual man. He was a county judge with a side arrangement that made him money and that nobody with the power to stop it had bothered to stop. He had done it for 9 years. He had processed, by the territorial investigator's final count, somewhere between 40 and 60 children through his private receiving facility in Bastrop County, collecting state subsidy on each placement, billing the county for services rendered, and sleeping without apparent difficulty every night of those 9 years. The reason I tell you this is not to make you angry, though you will be angry. It is because I think it matters to understand that monsters rarely look like monsters. They look like judges in expensive coats who come to your door before sunrise on county business. "Mr. Turner." Graves' voice was the voice of a man who had never in his life been asked to lower it. "You'll forgive the hour." "I won't, but go on." A thin smile. "May I come in?" "You may stand on my porch."
I've come on a matter concerning 2 infants reported to have been found near the old freight station last night." His eyes moved past Jack into the dark interior of the house. "The conductor on the 8 o'clock line is a reliable witness. The conductor was flying past in the dark at 40 miles an hour. I'll wait while you tell me what he saw."
"He saw a lantern. He saw your buggy."
Graves' gaze moved to Emily, standing to the left of the hallway entrance, and his eyes stayed there. "Where is Mrs. Carter?"
"I'm here,"
Emily said. Her voice came out level. She was as surprised as anyone. "Mrs. Carter, I'd like a word with you about what was found in that wagon." "Then you're welcome to ride to my house, Judge. This isn't my house."
A pause. The younger man with the satchel shifted on his feet.
"There were children in that wagon, Mr. Turner," Graves said. "Were there?" "Don't play with me." "I ain't playing, Judge. I'm asking if you saw them yourself, or if you're telling me what some conductor told you while he was warming himself by your stove."
The judge's jaw tightened once. "The state has an interest in any abandoned minor. You know that."
"I know what the state's interest costs," Jack said. "I know it pays $12 per child per month to whatever institution agrees to take 'em, and I know the institution keeps it." The silence on the porch went rigid. "Step aside, Mr. Turner." "No, sir." "I beg your—" "I said no, sir. You ain't got a warrant. You ain't got a deputy with authority on private property. You got a story from a man who passed by in the dark, and your own word. And your own word and mine are equal under this roof." Graves let the silence stretch. His clerk was sweating despite the cold. Then, from down the hall, the smaller twin let out a thin, wavering cry. The judge's eyes flicked toward the interior of the house. "What was that?" "My sister's cat," Jack said. "She cries like a fiddle with a broken string. You want to come in and meet her, you bring me a piece of paper that says I have to let you." Graves looked at him for a long moment. "You're making a serious mistake, Mr. Turner." "I've been making those my whole life. Reckon I can survive one more." Jack's hand rested easy at his side, nowhere near the gun at his hip, but the message was plain. "By the time the sun's up, I'll be ready for whoever you send. Good morning, Judge." He shut the door. Quiet. The latch clicked. He stood with his palm flat on the wood for a moment. Then he turned. "Emily." It was the first time he'd used her name. "He's coming back," she said. "He's coming back, with a paper, a deputy, and likely 2 of his own men. We've got till sunrise to figure out what we're doing. And Emily," he waited until she looked at him directly, "whatever we decide tonight, we decide together. These babies are in my house. That makes it my problem as much as yours." She held his gaze. Behind her, down the hallway, Sarah was humming something low and wordless to keep 2 infants quiet, and the sound filled the house the way light fills a room, not all at once, but slowly, getting into every corner. "All right," Emily said. "Together." By 4 in the morning, they knew 3 things. 1. Pastor Reed, the only justice of the peace in the county who didn't owe Graves $1, was not answering his door. Sarah had ridden out the back trail through the creek bed, the one only Hank and Jack knew about, and come back 20 minutes later, pale as old wax. "His house is empty, Jack. Door standing open, Bible on the table, coat on the hook, horse in the stall." She caught her breath. "Mrs. Pell at the next farm said 2 men in black coats rode up to his place at first light. One of them on a gray horse, brand she'd never seen before. She said it looked like a letter G with a line through it." The color left Jack's face the way water leaves a cracked cup. Emily watched it go. "That's his brand," she said, not a question. "That's his brand." 2. Graves had left a man at the cattle guard, just sitting on a horse in the cold, watching the house. Nothing goes out the front without him knowing. 3. And this was the one that changed everything. A federal land commissioner named Whitcomb was camped at the McAllen Ranch 3 miles south. He came through twice a year, surveying land claims for the railroad. He was the only federal officer within 60 miles in any direction, and the territorial code, as Sarah had read in the Galveston Daily News that past spring, allowed a federal commissioner to witness emergency guardianship in cases where no local justice of the peace was available. "Graves can't touch him," Jack said. "Graves don't outrank him. Graves don't even know him." "Then we ride for him," Emily said. "Graves's man is at the cattle guard." "Then I drive past him." Jack stared at her. "He doesn't know my face," she said. "He doesn't know my buggy. I drive past with a basket of preserves in my lap, and he sees a widow on her way to a neighbor's house at sunup. He doesn't think twice." "Emily, no." "Name another way." He didn't. "Jack," she kept her voice even, "I rode out to that wagon last night by myself. I climbed up into a freight car alone in the dark with no man and no gun. I think I can drive a buggy 3 miles to a neighbor's house in broad daylight. And if Whitcomb won't come, he'll come." "How do you know?" "Because he's a man. And every man I've ever known, when a frightened woman knocks on his door at sunrise with a story about babies, he gets on his horse, even if it's just to prove to himself he's not the kind of man who doesn't." Sarah said from the doorway, "She's right, Jack." "I know she's right." "Then say yes." He looked at Emily for a long moment, the lamplight between them, 2 infants asleep down the hall. "You bring him back in 2 hours," he said. "You don't stop for anything. And Emily," his voice dropped, "if something goes wrong on that road, you ride straight to the McAllen house and you stay there. You hear me? You don't come back." "I hear you." "Say it back." "If something goes wrong, I go to the McAllen house. I don't come back." He held her gaze 1 more second. "Hank," he called. The old ranch hand materialized from the kitchen so fast he must have been listening for the last hour. "Harness Mrs. Carter's horse to her buggy. Put a basket of jam jars under the seat and a quilt over it. Make it look like a call-in visit. On it. And Hank, you ride out behind her far enough back that the man at the gate don't see you. If anything happens, you ride straight for the federal man yourself. You don't stop for me. You don't stop for anybody. I hear you, boss." We all believe we are brave until bravery becomes specific, until it has a cold road in it and a man sitting on a horse at a gate, watching, until it has a basket of jam jars as your only cover and 2 babies you've known for 4 hours as your only reason. That morning, Emily Carter drove past that gate with her hands steady on the reins and her heart hammering against her ribs. And she did not look at the rider. And the rider did not look twice at her. That is what courage looks like from the outside. On the inside, it looks like not breathing until you're past. Jack stood at the window and watched her buggy wheels turn onto the road and disappear. And then he stood there a long time after that, looking at the empty road, because there was nothing else to do. Graves came back at 7:30. 5 riders. 2 deputies Jack knew by sight, 2 men he didn't. And Graves himself on a tall bay horse, a folded paper in his gloved hand. Behind them, an empty flatbed wagon with a driver.
Empty. Waiting. Jack opened the door before they reached the gate. "Mr. Turner?" Graves held up the paper. "I have the order this time." "Read it to me on the porch, Judge. I'm comfortable here."
Graves unfolded the paper and read it in the flat, practiced voice of a man who has done this before and expects it to work the way it always works. By order of the District Court, any abandoned minor or minors remanded to the custody of the County Office of Public Welfare, immediate transport to the Galveston Children's Home. Any party found sheltering said minors in defiance of this order shall be charged with obstruction. Fines not less than $50 per offense per day. He folded the paper. "That's the order, Mr. Turner." "That's a piece of paper you wrote yourself, Judge." "I am the presiding magistrate of this county." "You are also an interested party. A man can't be both at once. You can't sign an order favoring your own ledger. That's the law in every state I know of." "You are a rancher, Mr. Turner, not a lawyer." "No, sir, but I read." Graves stared at him. Something shifted behind his eyes. The calculation of a man who has been cornered before and always found a way out. "Step aside, Mr. Turner." "I won't." "Then I will have my men step you aside." "You can try." Jack's voice didn't change, didn't rise. "Judge, hear me a minute. Before you do what you came to do, I want a witness to what's happening here. A federal one." The change in Graves' face was small, but Jack saw it. "There is no federal officer in this county, Mr. Turner." "There is one. Land Commissioner Whitcomb, Federal Circuit, Texas Territories. Currently at the McAllen Ranch, 3 miles south." A pause. "Mr. Whitcomb is here on land business. He has no jurisdiction over child welfare." "He has jurisdiction over a private property owner being confronted by 5 armed men on horseback, Judge, and I'd surely appreciate a federal officer writing down what he sees." Jack kept his eyes level on Graves. "I'd look behind you." Graves did not turn. His deputy did. The deputy went very still. "Judge, what is it, Briggs?" "Judge, there's a buggy coming up the lane, with a federal officer sitting next to a woman." I believe, and I say this as someone who has read the full transcript of the Llano County hearing that followed, that the moment Leonard Graves heard those words, he understood it was over. Not the way a man understands something in his mind, the way he understands it in his hands, when they stop being steady without his permission. Power that depends on secrecy has a particular fragility. It only works while nobody is looking. The moment someone turns a lamp on it, it's already done. Emily drove the buggy up the lane at a fast trot. Beside her sat a tall, lean man in a black coat with a brass star on the lapel and a leather case across his knees and the expression of a man who has been woken before sunrise and has made his peace with it. Commissioner Whitcomb tipped his hat to Graves without warmth. "Judge Graves." "Commissioner." "Mrs. Carter tells me you've come to collect 2 infants from this property under a county order signed by yourself." "That is correct." "You signed your own order." "I am the presiding magistrate. You are an interested party to proceedings in which you also serve as judge." Whitcomb opened his leather case and removed a folded paper. He held it up. Mr. Turner and Mrs. Carter were married this morning at the McAllen Ranch. Civil ceremony, federal officer presiding. Documented under Territorial Code, Section 41, Paragraph 3. Filed and witnessed and stamped. The 5 riders on horseback did not make a sound. Graves stared at the paper. Whitcomb folded it back into his case. "A married couple of property in standing has applied for emergency guardianship of 2 abandoned infants. The application is filed before a federal officer.
There is not a county order in Texas that overrides a federal filing once it's stamped. You know that as well as I do. This is...
It is irregular, Judge. It is not illegal. Whitcomb looked out over the riders, unhurried, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who answers to an office Graves cannot reach. Meantime, you and your men are sitting on private property without invitation. I'd appreciate it if you turned around and rode home. Graves gathered his reins, his men gathered theirs, the flatbed driver turned his wagon. They rode out the way they came. Jack stood on the porch and didn't breathe until the last horse cleared the cattle guard. Then he sat down on the porch step like a man whose legs had finally remembered they were only bone. Emily climbed down from the buggy. She walked up to him and stood in front of him. "You're a married woman, Mrs. Turner," he said. "I'm aware of that, Mr. Turner." He looked up at her. "I didn't think the federal man would do it on the spot." "Neither did I. He said it was the fastest way. He said the guardianship wouldn't hold without it." "He's a smart man." "He's a tired man. He wants coffee." Jack almost laughed. He stood, slowly, every joint in his body older than it had been an hour ago. He put his hand on her arm. Just for a second. Just long enough to mean it. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For coming back." "Where would I go, Jack?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Inside, in the back bedroom, Sarah heard the front door open, and her brother's voice, and Emily's voice, and a third voice she didn't know. She let out the breath she'd been holding for 2 hours. She unlocked the door. She carried both twins out into the light. Federal Commissioner Whitcomb tipped his hat to the babies as though they were people of consequence, which, as it turned out, they were. He stayed long enough for coffee and to explain what came next. 48 hours, then a hearing before a district judge 2 counties over. Graves could not preside. Graves could not interfere. The application was filed. "Between now and that hearing," Whitcomb said, pulling on his coat, "Graves will not sit still. He has connections. He has favors owed. He will come at you again." "Then we'll be ready," Jack said. "You've got 48 hours, Mr. Turner." "That's enough." He left with 2 of Sarah's biscuits in his coat pocket. The minute his horse cleared the cattle guard, Sarah leaned her back against the front door and looked at her brother. "Jack." "I know." "You just got married." "I know, Sarah." "On a piece of paper. To a woman you met last night." "I know." "Say it out loud so you hear it." "I hear it." He glanced at Emily. "We both hear it." Emily was sitting in the rocking chair with Lily on her shoulder. She didn't look up. "I hear it too, Sarah." Sarah pushed off the door and went to the stove and started moving pots around with the energy of a woman who has nowhere else to put what she's feeling. By 11, both babies were asleep in the same basket. Lily's hand had found Noah's wrist in her sleep, small fingers curled tight around it, as if she'd decided in her sleep she wasn't letting go again. Sarah stood over them a long time without speaking. "They've been holding on to each other their whole lives," she said finally. "All 48 hours of it," Jack said. She looked at him. He looked at Emily. Emily looked at the basket. "Jack," Sarah said. "Don't, Sarah." "I'm asking one question." "Then ask it." "Are we filing the adoption petition when the 90 days is up?" He was quiet. "Jack." "We're filing it," he said. "Both of us." Sarah turned to Emily. "You sure?" Emily looked at Lily's hand wrapped around Noah's wrist. She thought of the note. "God forgive me, please." She thought of the woman who wrote it, young, alone, out of options, walking away from something she couldn't carry,
but couldn't stop loving. "I'm sure of this," Emily said, "than I've been of anything in 2 years." Sarah's voice went hoarse. "Will you want a witness?" "We'll need one." "Then you don't even have to ask." She looked at the basket. "I've been their aunt since the minute they came through that door. I've just been waiting on somebody to make it official."
Home isn't a place on a map. Every child in this story had already learned that before they were 12 hours old. They had been born into a home that couldn't hold them, left in a wagon that didn't want them, and brought into a house that had no reason to keep them except that the people in it decided to. Family is not the place you are born. It is the place where someone decides in the middle of the night that you are worth the trouble of staying. That evening, after the commissioner had gone and the dishes were washed and the fire had burned down to coals, Jack came in from checking the barn and found Emily standing at the kitchen window with a cup of cooling coffee in her hands, looking at the dark. "Jack." "Yeah?" "That boy. Your boy." She didn't turn around. "Tell me something about him." A long silence. "He had his mama's mouth," Jack said finally, "and my hairline, which was a cruelty to give a baby, and a laugh that came up out of him like he was surprised by it every time, like he couldn't believe something could feel that good." A pause. "Diphtheria took him in 2 days, took his mama in 3. "And you burned the cradle." "I did." "But not all of it." He was quiet. "Hank found it," Emily said, "in the loft. He brought it down and cleaned it and oiled the runners. It's by the hearth." Another silence, long enough to count the boards in the floor. "Good," Jack said. "It needed to come down anyway." She turned around. In the lamplight, his face looked like it had been carrying something heavy for 3 years and had just, in the last hour, set it down. "Jack." She crossed the kitchen and stood in front of him. "I want to keep their names, Lily and Noah." "Noah's a hard name to carry, for both of us. It's a name that loved somebody once." She held his gaze. "It can love somebody again." He nodded, slowly. Once. The way a man nods when he's decided something that matters. Outside, the November wind moved across the roof of the Turner Ranch. Inside, in the front room by the hearth, 2 babies slept in a cleaned and oiled cradle, side by side, the way they had been in the wagon and the basket, and every cold hour since. Lily's hand found Noah's wrist in the dark. His small face turned toward her. And in the kitchen doorway, a widow and a widower who had been married on paper for 8 hours stood close enough to share warmth without touching, and neither one of them said a word, because neither one of them needed to. Ask yourself, one last time, the question this story keeps asking. When something cries in the dark, a person, a marriage, a life that seems beyond saving, do you run toward it or away? Emily Carter ran toward it. Jack Turner ran toward it. In one sleepless night, they built something that courthouses and county judges and a man with 6 telegraph wires and a private facility in Bastrop County could not unmake. They built a family. Not from love at first sight or grand gestures or favorable circumstances. From the decision made in a cold freight wagon in Gillespie County, Texas, in November of 1878, to not walk away from something that needed them. Every time I read the comments on a story like this one, I remember something Emily said years later when people asked her how she'd known what to do that night. She said, "I didn't know. I just kept running toward the crying. That's the whole thing. That's all of it." Where are you listening from? Drop your city or state below. I want to see how far Lily and Noah's story travels tonight. And if you've ever been the one crying in the dark, hoping somebody would come, stay for the next one. That story is for you, too.